Martin Luther King Jr. Letter from Birmingham Jail. Welcome to Garage Geek, and this is the first episode of Penguin a Day, Penguin Moderns #1. So this is the first episode in 50. So let's hope I make it there. Today, I'm going to be discussing this slim volume. There are actually two texts in this short volume. The first is a letter from Birmingham Jail, and the second is The 3 Dimensions of a Complete Life, which was a sermon. So Martin Luther King Jr. was born in 1929, Atlanta, Georgia, USA. Died in 1968, Memphis, Tennessee. So he died the year that I was born. Letter from Birmingham Jail. Written on the margins of a newspaper in an Alabama jail in 1963, Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from Birmingham Jail is a response to 8 white Alabama clergymen who argued that the battle against racial segregation should be fought in the courts, not the streets. The letter is a little over half of this volume. The letter is dated April 16th, 1963. So Dr. King was given a newspaper, I think it was snuck in, and he actually started writing this letter in the margins of the newspaper. He's addressing what the white clergymen had to say, and he addresses each item that they critique. He says, "But since I feel that you are men of genuine goodwill and that your criticisms are sincerely set forth, I want to try to answer your statements in what I hope will be patient and reasonable terms." So the first argument is that he really doesn't have a place for being in Birmingham. He addresses this at length. He states, but more basically, I am in Birmingham because injustice is here. Later he states, I cannot sit idly by in Atlanta and not be concerned about what happens in Birmingham. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. In fact, that is the quote that is on the frontispiece page. What brought about him coming to Birmingham was that the city had agreed to take out racial signs from their shops, but that wasn't enforced and they kept doing it. And so he feels like the people of Birmingham were victims of a broken promise, as he puts it. Now he goes to great lengths to tell the clergyman that this was something that was prepared for and that the people that were chosen to do this were practiced. We decided to undertake a process of self-purification. We began a series of workshops on nonviolence, and we repeatedly asked ourselves, are you able to accept blows without retaliating? Are you able to endure the ordeal of jail? And he says, there is a type of constructive nonviolent tension which is necessary for growth. He goes on to say, I must say to you that we have not made a single gain in civil rights without determined legal and nonviolent pressure. Lamentably, it is a historical fact that privileged groups seldom give up their privileges voluntarily. Individuals may see the moral light and voluntarily give up their unjust posture, but groups tend to be more immoral than individuals. We know through painful experience that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. And he uses the word wait. And this word wait almost always equates to never.
Justice too long delayed is justice denied. He
says that the people often ask, how can you advocate breaking some laws and obeying others? The answer lies in the fact that there are 2 types of law, just and unjust. I would be the first to advocate obeying just laws. One has not only a legal but a moral responsibility to obey just laws. Conversely, one has a moral responsibility to disobey unjust laws. He gives multiple examples of this, but one of the most powerful ones is, throughout Alabama, all sorts of devious methods are used to prevent Negroes from becoming registered voters. And there are some counties in which, even though Negroes constitute a majority of the population, not a single Negro is registered. Can any law enacted under such circumstances be considered democratically structured? He also goes on to talk about the process of nonviolent protest. He makes it personal about why he does it and how he feels the need. He states, one who breaks an unjust law must do so openly, lovingly, and with a willingness to accept the penalty. I submit that an individual individual who breaks a law that conscience tells him is unjust and who willingly accepts the penalty of imprisonment in order to arouse the conscience of the community over its injustice is in reality expressing the highest respect for law. This is interesting because he is trying to show in so many ways how the white clergy is wrong. He wants to shame them for their inactivity and their status quo. First, I must confess that over the past few years, I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in his stride toward freedom is not the Ku Klux Klanner, but the white moderate who is more devoted to order than to justice. He says that there are two movements, one for violence and one for nonviolence. And he does bring up Elijah Muhammad's Muslim movement, and he does go on to say why he believes that that is not the correct way, why he believes that the nonviolent protest is the correct way. The Negro has many pent-up resentments and latent frustrations, and he must release them. So let him march. Let him make prayer pilgrimages to the city hall. Let him go on freedom rides and try to understand why he must do so. If his repressed emotions are not released in nonviolent ways, they will seek expression through violence. This is not a threat, but a fact of history. And here we get to, I think, one of the most impactful parts of the letter. And this is where he directly accuses the writers of the letters. I have been so greatly disappointed with the white church and its leadership. He goes on to give many examples why. I felt that the white ministers, priests, and rabbis of the South would be among our strongest allies. Instead, some have been outright opponents, refusing to understand the freedom movement and misrepresenting its leaders. All too many others have been more cautious than courageous and have remained silent behind the anesthetizing security of stained glass windows. But he says that there can be no deep disappointment where there is not deep love. Yes, I love the church. I thought this was very powerful. It's getting very near the end of the letter, and I think he pulls out some of the stops. Before closing, I feel impelled to mention one other point in your statement that has troubled me profoundly. You warmly commended the Birmingham police force for keeping order and preventing violence. I doubt that you would have so warmly commended the police force if you had seen its dogs sinking their teeth into unarmed, non-violent Negroes. And the final statement is damning. I cannot join you in your praise of the Birmingham Police Department. Later, he goes on to say, I wish you had commended the Negro sit-inners and demonstrators of Birmingham for their sublime courage, their willingness to suffer, and their amazing discipline in the midst of great provocation. One day, the South will recognize its real heroes. Pretty powerful stuff. It was a profoundly moving document, and it was extremely well written. This is a great way to start off this series of books. However, it's not done yet. The second text in this slim volume is called The 3 Dimensions of a Complete Life. The 3 Dimensions of a Complete Life was first delivered as a sermon at the New Covenant Baptist Church in Chicago on April 9th, 1967. In this sermon, he states, and there are 3 dimensions of any complete life to which we can fitly give the words of this text: length, breadth, and height. Very geometrical. So the rest of this sermon is he breaks down each part. So we start with length, and that's a concern for one's own welfare or keeping yourself alive as long as you can. Breadth is the outward concern for the welfare of others, and height is an upward reach for God, but there's going to be more to it than that. So as he starts talking about length, he says, before you can love others' selves adequately, you've got to love your own self properly. You have to accept yourself. He says there are so many people trying to be somebody else. Now he does directly address African Americans. Too many Negroes that are ashamed of themselves, ashamed of being black. A Negro got to rise up and say from the bottom of his soul, I am somebody, I have a rich, noble, and proud heritage. However exploited and however painful my history has been, I'm black, but I'm black and beautiful. He says that part of length is recognizing what you're to do in life and to be happy with that. satisfied with that. After we discovered our life's work, we should set out to do that work so well that the living, the dead, or the unborn couldn't do it any better. Now, this does not mean that everybody will do the so-called big recognized things in life. Very few people will rise to the heights of genius in the arts and the scientists. Most of us will have to be content to work in the fields and in the factories and on the streets, but we must see the dignity of all labor. So the second dimension of a complete life is caring for others. He does tell the story of the Good Samaritan. That the Good Samaritan thought about not what will happen to me if I stop to help this man, but what will happen to this man if I do not stop to help him? And then he ties this to the civil rights movement. What will happen to humanity if I don't help? What will happen to the civil rights movement if I don't participate? What will happen to my city if I don't vote? What will happen to the sick if I don't visit them? This is how God judges people in the final analysis. Somewhere along the way, we must learn that there is nothing greater than to do something for others. The next part of the speech is actually very moving, considering that he was to die shortly after this, less than a year later. I don't know how long I'll live, and I'm not concerned about that. But I hope I can live so well that the preacher can get up and say, he was faithful, that's all, that's enough. He who is greatest among you shall be your servant. I want to be a servant. He says, and don't forget in doing something for others that you have what you have because of others. We are tied together in life and in the world. And he goes on to give numerous examples of how everyone has gotten to where they are, not as an individual, but through a group effort. Now, the next section is about atheism. And I'm going to have to say, though, that there was one line that really struck me. He says, there are a lot of people who affirm the existence of God with their lips, and they deny his existence with their lives. And this was the line that I thought was really very nicely written. A high blood pressure of creeds and an anemia of deeds. Even though I'm an atheist, I did like his argument. I thought it was sweet and it was touching, although it really doesn't counter an atheist point of view. He says, a few theologians are trying to say that God is dead, and I have been asking them about it because it disturbs me to know that God died and I didn't have a chance to attend the funeral. He tells this touching story of Sister Pollard, who he actually mentioned in his letter from Birmingham, but not by name. Now, during the Montgomery, Alabama bus boycott, Sister Pollard, who was very old and had to walk really far to work, was asked if she wanted to ride, and she stated that she didn't. The driver drove a little bit ahead and stopped again and waited for her, and was like, are you sure you don't want to ride? And they asked, well, aren't you tired? And she stated, yes, my feet is tired, but my soul is rested. So the last thing that I'm going to say about this sermon is that he does talk about how Sister Pollard has since died, but since her death, he has been in more than 18 jail cells. He's come perilously close to death at the hands of a demented Negro woman, and he's seen his home bombed 3 times. Since that time, he's had to live every day under the threat of death. One of the ways that he continues is that he can hear Sister Pollard's words ringing over and over again in his head. God's going to take care of you. Those were the first 2 texts that are in this slim volume of 51 pages. Now, the second text seems to have been transcribed from a recording, because at the bottom it says, recording interrupted. I thoroughly enjoyed this. I thought it was such a powerful and moving read. This was a great one to begin with. On the back it states, this landmark missive from one of the greatest activists in history calls for direct, nonviolent resistance in the fight against racism and reflects on the healing power of love. So in the inside of these books, they tell you where you can get these. And they are in the Penguin Moderns. The first one is called A Gift of Love. And the second one is Why We Can't Wait. Now, as I stated in my inauguration video, these can be difficult to find in the United States. But Why We Can't Wait is also put out, I believe, by Signet Books. So you can find this cheaply and readily available in the United States. So as we're starting out this first text from the 50 text box set, I'm going to have to say that this one was a very strong and powerful opening. I'm not going to have the same reaction for the second one, which is going to be Allen Ginsberg's Television Was a Baby Crawling Toward That Death Chamber. As always, I want to thank all of you for the support, and any comments that you have would be greatly appreciated.